All right, so I have here is the Srx8 GT. I just installed the 4-shoe clutch, showed you how to assemble that on the Protek Samurai engine. I'm going to show you a couple things you need to check for when you're installing your engine. The first thing you want to do is make sure that your gear mesh from the clutch bell to the center differential is close to center. You don't want the clutch bell sticking too far forward or too far aft and not having complete mesh with the differential, the center differential. So I'm trying to get you a good view if possible. I think maybe that's a good view. Right there, it shows you the entire width of the clutch bell teeth is fully engaged with the differential. So that is mandatory. You have to have that good mesh. If you don't, your spur gear will wear out quick on the differential, and then your clutch bell will wear. The next thing you want to do is make sure that your flywheel is centered as close as you can from forward to aft, so that your starter box will properly engage it. The only real way to adjust your flywheel is by a shim underneath the collet before you assemble the entire assembly. With the Serpent products, the 8 scale off-road, the engine mounts are fixed, so there is no adjustment on the 4 screws. That means that when you tighten it down, you're going to use the engine to mount screws to adjust it inboard to outboard, forward to aft, as well as your twist. So what I had to do is I had to shim, or actually remove some of the material from this outboard mount on the inside in order to allow the engine to come out. If I didn't do that, the gear mesh, hopefully you can hear that, was too tight. If the gear mesh is too tight, you'll have very rapid wear of the spur gear and clutch bell. You'll place a lot of side load on the crankshaft, and the crankshaft is not made to take any kind of side loads. It's made to rotate. So if you're preloading the crankshaft, inboard or outboard because your mesh is incorrect, it'll cause accelerated bearing wear. You're also going to have your clutch bell is going to wear really quickly, and your spur gear is going to wear out pretty quickly. So what I do is I've taken a file, matter of fact, this file right here, and I took the outboard mount and just filed off some of the material on the inboard of this mount, installed the mount on the engine. I pushed the mount as far into the engine as possible, which means that the engine is as far outboard as possible. I cranked down, I tightened all 4 screws down here. Those 2 are tight, and now I'll tighten up these inboard screws. If I can find my wrench. So these will be the last screws you tighten. And I'll take the engine apart and show you where I machined or used a file to take off some of the material so that the engine will properly sit in here. So once you set this gear mesh, on your first build, that's about it. You don't have any more adjustments. As the teeth on the spur gear and the clutch bell and differential gear, as they wear in, they'll loosen up. And when you do your maintenance, you'll be able to maintain your mesh by moving the engine in as it wears. So, but for this initial build, when the engine's really tight, the clutch bell has all the material on it. That gear mesh is really, really tight, and you don't want to have that gear mesh too tight. You also don't want it to be flopping around. So with the OS engines and the Samurai engines, Protek, which I believe are OS branded engines, the crankcase of the engine is very wide, and it prevents the proper alignment. So you do need to adjust the mounts. Now, You could remove some material from the crankcase, or you could remove material from the mount. I chose to take it off the mount because the mount is far less expensive than the crankcase of the engine. So I'm going to tear this thing apart, show you where I machined it, and how to assemble it. Thank you.